Hi, I'm Clorin,
And I'm Ty.
and this is spoiler warning. We're trying a new thing out where we talk excessively about the points of a movie that we did not like, what could have been better, and what we did like, and as the name implies, it's filled with spoilers.
Right, yeah, so if you wanted to go into whatever the subject of the current episode is, spoiler free, we suggest that you watch the movie. Usually, leave a link in the description of our written review, and come back to us when you're ready to hear us go into the finer points.
Yeah, we're not naturals at this, but hopefully we'll get some practice. Anyway, today we'll be discussing a movie called 100 Feet. It's not very good at all. Basically, it operates on the premise that a woman who just murdered her abusing husband she's under house arrest. So, you know, she comes home, she's on parole, and they hook her up with an ankle bracelet and put a giant blinking box in the middle of her stairwell for some reason and tell her she can't move within 100 feet of the box. And instead of 100 feet, it seems to be 30 feet. Which, yeah, go on.
Yeah, well, it's the gentleman who goes installing the box, who is instantly the only likable character in the entire movie. Sets out to explain that he's going to set in a central location so she has more mobility within her house.
He's the nicest guy in the movie, by the way. His name is
Yeah.
Jimmy.
And what we find out by virtue of her can't move with more than 100 feet away from this is she cannot actually open her front door without leaning to her body's extent, and she can't go more than 3 steps into her basement.
Yeah, and except for really the basement bit, it's not actually very plot relevant at all. I mean, she does do a lot of running around outside for the 3-minute time limit. But just to give people an idea of how big 100 feet is, one story of a building is usually about 10 feet.
Yeah.
So that's roughly 10 stories that she is allowed to wander around in. You know, just lay flat a 10-story building. That's like a walk up and down the block.
And
It's not bad.
yeah. Anyways, as Corn was mentioning, the 100 foot sort of barrier is really used more as a plot device to explain why she doesn't run out of the house earlier.
I think it's part of the long metaphor. We mentioned in the review that I personally believe that this is a very long metaphor for an abusive relationship ending in divorce, except it's with a dead man.
Yeah. So, for those who have watched the movie don't care about spoilers, basically this woman under house arrest, within the first night or so, starts seeing the ghost of her dead abusive husband, who decided that being dead isn't enough of an excuse to stop beating her up. So she goes through, I think it's stated as a weekend of this ghost showing up at pretty well every night, wrecking her shit, and leaving her with bruises to explain to the detective keeping watch on her.
Oh, speaking of the detective, Detective Shanks, the
Oh yeah,
former partner of the man she killed, is the the main person who is investigating this entire case, which is a conflict of interest and would never actually happen due to
yeah,
police protocol and stuff. You're not supposed to work on a case that you are personally involved with, and he is very personally involved with this. I mean, he comes in like wearing his whole grudge against her on his sleeve, bad mouthing her, and why don't you just make out with that guy kind of deal. Except I don't. Yeah.
yeah. It's basically when he isn't being your murdering scumbag to her, he's spending as much other time as he can making sure that he thinks she's a murdering scumbag.
Except when suddenly, plot conveniently, he flip flops. Like,
Oh yeah, and
about an hour into the movie, he suddenly, oh, I decided to check all the files involved with my partner and realized you filed 6 assault reports on him, and we never took you seriously. Except this was, one, mentioned in the very beginning of the movie. Two, this should have been a thing that they looked at before they convicted her to prison. And three, what the balls? Like, he's suddenly, like, obsessed with her. Oh, I won't let you touch her or anything. I will protect you. And then
yeah,
he's
and
yelling at her and gone.
it's one of those. Sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, it's one of those sort of things that could have been delivered better in a better movie. That could have been delivered in a believable way if there had been any kind of inclination that he had in any way suspected, or that he was in any way sorry about this, or that he wanted to believe her, that he even liked her before his partner was killed. But it just comes completely out of the blue during one of his check-ins on her. It's just, it's from the day previous, he's still going on all about, oh, you murdered my partner, oh, why haven't you cleaned up the mess that you made, oh, I hope that you rot in hell. And then the next day, he's saying, like, are you being abused, are you being beaten, are you covering for somebody, did somebody else murder him and you're covering for them? And it just all comes across as being completely out of nowhere, just written into, because the writers suddenly realized that they had made the guy into an asshole.
Yeah. Oh, man. There's a lot of random characters that really aren't entirely necessary to the plot as well, such as our favorite, Chandra, her friend from the inside.
Yeah, I think Chandra's a little more relevant than the boy that the lady ends up hooking up with,
Well,
and
he
she only
delivers
has
her
like one
groceries.
line. Yeah,
And what about her sister as well? Her sister that came in. So basically, Chandra is her friend from the inside. Calls in the very very beginning of the movie. Basically, for about 2 minutes, she's, hey, how are you doing? And then, oh, pretty good. Hey, you're lucky to be outside. No, I'm not. It sucks. I'm stuck in a house. I'm in prison. Good perspective. Hey, you should get laid. Do a booty call. No. Alright, see you later. Wink. Bye. That's
yeah,
the entire Chandra thing. And then she's never mentioned again that there's no other phone call. She's not, like, some form of support for... Right, so she's not a very good support for Marnie at all, as she doesn't even show up after that. And it's never mentioned again. She's not relevant at all, except to show that, hey, I could use the phone, except the phone is basically all that Marnie uses. And then we have the case of the random sister, the random asshole sister.
yeah. And a scene that almost felt like more like it was supposed to establish that people were angry at her for the whole murder thing. But the sister shows up and is cold right off the bat, despite Marnie being incredibly happy that she showed up, and decides to basically end the conversation with saying that she's an embarrassment to the family and she spends as much time as she can pretending she was an only child. Again, not really alluded to at the beginning of the movie, not in any way referenced later on in the movie. It's just a one-off scene that felt like
Yeah,
it was,
it,
yeah.
it was kind of shoehorned in. It was just totally random. I don't understand why they decided to put that in, except to say that she has no family anyway. Nobody cares. Her mom's dead. And then it doesn't actually develop her character at all, except to say she likes her sister despite her sister being a total douche wiener. But then that's not even totally relevant. We could have gotten along without that one bit in there.
Yeah.
And then there's plot convenient cat.
Yeah, and this was one that kind of worried us when it came in, because with the amount of horror movies we do watch, one of the biggest trends we've noticed is that any time a cat or a dog or any other kind of lovable furry creature shows up, it's usually just so that the creature can die. that caused an emotional impact.
Yeah, it's even
Thankfully,
woohoo.
oh sorry,
It's even a regular trope. Like the cats always die. There's so many random cat deaths. It's an awful trend too, and we were fully expecting this the entire time. You have random bits where you hear flies buzzing. You fully expect to see that cat dead.
yeah, and then thankfully, Cat survives to the end of the movie, probably due to the fact that he only seems to be around when the writers feel it's convenient and is in no way actually integrated into the scene.
Yeah, for some reason, like Marnie finds him under the bed, and he only appears when the poltergeist of the abusive husband shows up, and it's only to hiss and then run away. Maybe the cat shows up on a table once when she's applying for jobs. Like, I guess they put the cat in so she had something else to talk to instead of just herself, maybe to make her look a little bit less like she might be developing some sort of mental illness, because everybody talks to their pets. So she sort of adopts it, I guess. But it continuously just disappears throughout the entire movie. And there's a long stretch of maybe half an hour, 40 minutes, 45 minutes even, that the cat just is gone. We have no idea what happened to it. It's just, oh yeah, there was a cat.
Yeah, and it's one of those points where just for all you know, if you had not in some way managed to miss the scene where the cat was introduced, you would not have assumed a cat ever was introduced into the movie.
I'm wondering if you could probably easily cut that cat out.
Well, probably.
Yeah.
All right. So, I don't know about you, but I want to get to, I think, the two biggest sticking points with both of which centering around the grocery delivery boy, Joey.
Oh, goodness. Baby-faced Joey. Barely
Yeah.
older than me. Probably younger than me. Um, he looks like he might be between 17 and 20. 22
Yeah.
at the oldest. At the absolute oldest.
Yeah. So, Joey, to make a point of having his introduction happen very shortly after talking to Chandra, with the thought of "you should get laid" being
Booty
fresh in her
call!
head. and and almost right from the outset, like at first you just kind of assume, oh, it's just going to be someone to talk to, but no, pretty quickly it's made clear that she finds him attractive, and I guess in a baby faces sort of way he is.
It's a very
But
stereotypical kind of attractive. The kind of attractive when you're looking for not a bloomed flower, but a little bud kind of deal. Like,
yeah,
as she says right in the movie, robbing the cradle.
yeah, and going off of the bud thing, for the longest time they basically are just buddies. Like you treat him for the most part as again along the same lines as the cat, as someone for her to talk to, as some form of social interaction to keep her from going nuts locked up in the house. And
And then they bone.
he's very and then they bone. Yeah. So part of the reason I wanted to bring up Joey is because he's the center of the most gratuitous scenes in this movie.
Yeah.
She ends up calling him up one night because she's terrified with her dead husband beating the crap out of her from beyond the grave,
Yeah, there's
and
that.
he decides to show up to try to comfort her, and she finally caves and lets him in.
By the way, it
And
was a really pointless phone call. She calls him up, hey, I'm not feeling too good. And he just says, okay, I'm coming over. She says, no. Okay, bye. I'm going to be coming over. No. And then they hang up. Like, that was it. That was all. Like, this guy's 20. Why does he think that, like, this 30 to 40-year-old woman wants him to come over and bang her brains out? I feel like that might have been his assumption from the start. Well, yeah, he's male, but not all dudes are douchebags. At least I'd like to believe this.
Correction, he's a 20-year-old male in a movie. The key point being in a movie.
Yeah,
Or anything
in a movie.
stereotypical.
he kind of forces his way in. By the way, he's just not really forcing, but kind of walks up, yells at her window, even though she told him not to come over, and says, "Hey, I'm going to stand outside in the rain for the entire night unless you let me inside." And she says, "No, go home. No, go home. No, go home. Okay." And she tosses him the keys. He goes inside, and he bangs her brains out while she stares at the specter of her husband staring back at her on the ceiling. And then she really, really enjoys it up until they wake up in the morning.
But yeah, and as you said, the morning opens up, the sun is shining. Arnie looks outside and is happy and at peace. And she turns around, and Joey gets pinned to a wall. And horrible, terrible things start happening. Like, I do not want to go into details with
I'll go
this.
into detail.
No, let's just leave it at.
But it is it's gratuitous violence, and
It's bloody. Limbs and other parts bended in ways that they shouldn't, and just left with a bloody, crumpled heap on the ground that is
take it like
barely
this:
recognizable as a person.
if you've had an action figure or a not action figure, whatever, the dolls with the movable joints, and you've ever spun their arms around or turned their head in uncomfortable ways, or slammed their teeth into various things and broke their nose and something like that, or
What was that about not going into detail?
I'm talking about an action figure.
Yeah, sure, action figure.
Or crushed their organs with your fists or anything like that. And then,
I don't want to know what action figures you played with.
I had dinosaurs.
Okay.
And then, kind of thrown around like a rag doll in Skyrim. That's basically, basically what happened. Leading up to that point, the violence was more your standard kind of what you stereotypically think of domestic violence. There's dishes being thrown, maybe an errant slap here and there, tables being thrown across the entire house.
Yeah, it's sort of, the old ghost movie, favorite of the scare with the hand and the garbage disposal,
Oh,
and
God.
and just, well, this a typical horror movie fare, and then it just suddenly, like, with no indication, goes so hyper violent, just in ways that the movie didn't allude it was capable of. And honestly, like, if they were trying to get a shock out of it, congratulations, they succeeded, but holy crap, does that feel tasteless.
That was probably the most tense part in the movie, too. I'm not gonna lie. The ghost design wasn't very imaginative. It was more like a guy wearing a bloody mask.
Yeah.
Tyler thought it was Slender Man in the first few scenes we've seen him in.
So they revealed he had a face.
He
But,
barely had one anyway.
yeah. So, and going off from that, so we've had a cop who has gone from believing she is scum on earth to believing she should be protected to believing she is crazy to a boy who went from being a friend to being a fuck buddy to being a corpse.
That
And
was probably my favorite scene, by the way. Not the one where he gets beat up, but after his corpse ends up falling through the ceiling.
yeah, that actually was probably their best done scene as well, just because like
It's kind of
it was
comedic,
one of the most
in a dark humor kind of way.
well, yeah, that, but it's also one of the most like legitimately tense for the protagonist. Like it's one of those few moments where you actually kind of find yourself. I mean, it's not so much rooting for her because, of course, you're going to hope that she doesn't get murdered because she hasn't shown to be a terrible person, just not necessarily a very smart one. But and this in that moment as they show the ceiling giving way, knowing what's stashed up there, and the whole scene, and maybe a couple of the other scenes through it show that despite the shaky premise, the almost haphazard storytelling, the really poor acting like you're talking on a phone to no one, that they actually had a pretty decent amount of attention to detail. And maybe with a better writing team, maybe with a better script, maybe with better actors, this movie could have been something more
Yeah.
until we get to the ending.
Oh, let's not cover the end. Just well, we can, because I want to cover how exactly I think this is a metaphor for divorce and
That
the lead up to it. Because basically she's trapped in this house. She can't leave this house. She's trapped in this relationship, and nobody believes that he's beating up on her, even though he's a dead guy. Um, and she's always covering for him. Like the policeman Shanks regularly comes in to check up on her, and she's beaten, she's bruised, and has somebody been beaten up on you? No, I fell down the stairs. No, I cut myself. Oh no, it was me. Don't worry about it. Like it reminds me a lot of what people go through when they are being abused. It's not everybody's case, but it's certainly a common theme. So, as I said, she's trapped in this relationship. She's trying her best to deal with it. She screams, she shouts, she tries to fix it with like sage and everything like that. She finds people to talk to. She gets Cat, and meanwhile this horrible presence every night comes home and beats the shit out of her, treats her like shit, even though the guy is dead. And towards the end, as it gets worse and worse and worse over time, she finally yells at him and says, "Oh, it's over!" And I don't know why she still had her wedding ring on her and why she still wore it, despite the fact that she hated the guy's guts and ended up killing him because he was such a douchebag and abused her so badly. And just she took off the ring and threw it at him. "It's over." And he caught it and he looks at it. He's like, "Oh, I can't believe you're divorcing me. Is it really over?" Then he just kind of explodes. But
and that's it.
yeah, as if divorce will fix everything. It doesn't, but
And and the issue at the end is through all this, through all these terrible things that have happened, through the very clear allegories to abusive relationships, through the use of an abusive relationship, all that ends it all is throwing away a ring she shouldn't have had anymore to begin with. Like, so
even
much of this could have been avoided. This entire movie really could have been avoided, and she could have just been serving a nice, quiet house arrest sentence. She had her groceries already delivered. She was working on getting jobs to work from home. It would have been dull. It wouldn't have made for a good movie, I know. But a young boy wouldn't have been dead.
yeah, and even trying to justify the reason that she kept this ring, it still sounds really flimsy. I mean, as I said before, she hated the guy, and there were moments when you thought, oh, maybe she could have, like, no, and just maybe she felt guilty, maybe it was just worth a lot of money, you know, maybe, and this is a jump, maybe it just reminded her of the good times, but I don't think there were any good times, to be honest, the way she talks about it. Um, I mean, it wasn't obvious in the beginning, but that ring was like the big focus for the thing. I guess it just sort of marked her as being owned by this dude. So
Yeah. All in all, a disappointing ending that could have been less disappointing if not for the incredibly anticlimactic ending. So long story short, or I guess long rambling summed up, uh, the movie has its moments. Like the attention to detail, the things that carry over from scene to scene are definitely welcome. And you can definitely tell that they tried, that this was an earnest effort. Just unfortunately, either through scenes that may have been cut or through faults in the writing, the whole thing doesn't come together as a good cohesive whole. And it just feels like uh,
it doesn't. It's a good effort, but not enough to put it up there beyond mediocre at best. I wouldn't say it's a good movie.
yeah,
I wouldn't say it's an awful movie, but
but it is definitely
it's a
not worth a second.
yeah, it's a movie. Anyway, this is Clorin and Ty with spoiler warning. Hopefully next time we'll have a better organization of things. This is our very first Pioneer episode. So I hope you guys stick around to enjoy, and thank you for listening, and
Thank
have a
you.
good night.